Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni moli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you would join us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show in the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcasts. Our guest today is Melanie Watt. She is here to celebrate her beautiful picture book. It's called Scaredy Squirrel Gets a Surprise. Before we invite Melanie in the studio, we want to invite you to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram, at Reading With Your Kids on TikTok, and at Jedley Magic on Twitter. We also want to invite you to a live performance. We will be part of Rockland Day in Rockland, Massachusetts. It's happening June 18th, 2022. I'll be performing at 2 p.m., but we will have a Reading With Your Kids table there for the bulk of the day. Come on over. We'll be giving away lots of books, giving away bookmarks, and saying hi to everybody who comes over. Looking forward to seeing you there. Join us right now from the beautiful province of Quebec in the land of Canada. Our guest is here today to celebrate her wonderful book. It's called Scaredy Squirrel Gets a Surprise. Please welcome to the show, Melanie Watt. Hey, Melanie, how are you?
I'm awesome. How are you?
I'm pretty awesome, too. Melanie and I just had a wonderful chat about Montreal and Quebec City and her beautiful home province. It really is a beautiful place in the world. It's a cold part of the world, but it is really beautiful.
For sure. Yeah, there's lots to see and it's a great place. But for sure, February is probably the time, the most difficult time. You need a lot of coats and a lot of layers. So.
Yes, I was sharing with Melanie that my beautiful wife and I visited Montreal in February one year. Not quite sure why we chose that destination, but she wanted to get out of the country, but didn't want to go crazy about it. So driving from Boston to Montreal seemed to be a good choice. And it was. We had a fun time.
I'm sure. Well, especially if you enjoy sports and skiing and all that stuff, that's they're great places to go.
Yeah. So tell us all about Scaredy Squirrel Gets a Surprise, please.
Well, it's the second edition of the graphic novels for Scaredy Squirrel, and I'm really excited because I'm really proud of it. And it's about Scaredy. He receives a mysterious crate at the bottom of his tree, and he doesn't know where it's from and what's inside. And knowing Scaredy Squirrel, he kind of goes nuts about trying to figure out what to do with it. So he's going to imagine the worst scenarios as usual and try to figure out what to do.
It's really, really fun. And I love that this is a graphic novel because we really celebrate graphic novels here. And I kind of came to the realization, and I've mentioned this on the podcast a number of times, I never truly appreciated that reading graphic novels was reading, and it was just as valuable a reading experience as reading Shakespeare or, the Iliad and the Odyssey, especially for young kids, especially for reluctant readers. A graphic novel might be the only thing that catches some of those readers' attentions and turns them into readers.
Yeah, for me, it was something new because I had never done a graphic novel before, and I took a little break from creating Scaredy Squirrel stories for a while, and to come back, I felt like it would be nice to do something different, fresh, and the graphic novel idea came, and for me, it's a lot of fun because I get to make Scaredy Squirrel talk. So he has a dialogue now. So it's not like having the narration from the picture books. And he also gets to interact with other characters, which is a new thing as well. And it's kind of fun for the humor and trying to figure out everyone's personality and what would they say in this situation? How would they react? So, for me, it's something I'm discovering and I'm having a lot of fun with it.
Tell me a little bit about Scaredy Squirrel. He seems like an interesting character.
Well, I would say Scaredy Squirrel, the name kind of says it. He's afraid of a lot of things. Oftentimes he's afraid of things that don't necessarily make total sense. Some of his fears make sense and some of them are totally out of context. And I think that's what makes it funny. Like if he's going to be afraid of sharks, but he's going to be afraid of sharks in ponds. So, so I guess, that's kind of one of the examples that I like to use. He's a character I came up with about 15 years ago. And in the first picture book, he was afraid of germs and had a mask and gloves. And he was kind of like ahead of time for wanting to protect himself.
I was going to say, sounds like all of us the past 2 years.
Exactly. So it's kind of bizarre that something that was really exaggerated at the time, 15 years ago, now kind of feels more like, part of our reality.
Yeah.
So
I imagine a kid reading that book from 15 years ago would be sitting down going, so what's so weird about this? I have a mask on now.
Exactly. So, he had the Purell and everything at the time. So, and I did too. So, I'm not a germaphobe per se, but I've always been on, like, Scaredy's, inspired a little bit, from me and experiences, that I have. Maybe I'm not the biggest risk taker. And at one point, I was working on children's books and staying at home and not going out too much. And I guess that's what inspired the idea of Scaredy Squirrel. And if you don't take any risks, how do you really know what you're capable of?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I love that idea. And that's a great thing to talk to our kids about. If you don't take any risks, how can you know what you're capable of? Right.
And in the first ever Scaredy Squirrel, like the introduction of the character, he's going to end up trying to protect himself. He has an emergency kit in case something happens, but he's going to eventually fly out of his tree, leap out of his tree into the unknown and discover that he's a flying squirrel. And that's kind of the example of how do you know what your real talents are if you haven't tried anything different or risked anything and you're just trying to stay in your comfort zone. Mm-hmm. So,
I think that's one of the things as parents, it's important for us to remember that we need to encourage our kids to take risks. We don't want them to be reckless or do anything that's really dangerous, but we do want them to take risks. And I think kids, not all kids, but I think kids tend to be risk takers. I think in recent years it's been more of parents being the ones who want to bubble wrap their kids and not wanting to have their kids experience any kind of disappointment or loss or hurt. And I know that that's coming from a loving place, but I think it's misplaced. I don't think it really serves our kids if they don't learn to be resilient and if they don't learn to take risks and find out who they truly are and what they're made of.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I'm a parent myself, and I tend to go in that direction too. Like, where's the helmet? Put the knee pads. You're going on a bike. But for sure, they need to have, to feel that they can resolve problems themselves too. Like that they have the capacity to know for themselves what's safe and what's not. Like, we can't just pad them up and say, go anywhere you want to go. They need to understand the reason why they're padded, or the reason why we're a little cautious about certain things. So I always say knowledge is power, and the more you know about something, the less you'll fear it. Yeah. So that's what I like about Scaredy. He's going to learn a little something about his fear and realize that it's not so bad. And, that's pretty much our job as a parent, as teachers, as kids, is to always try to go towards the information, the knowledge. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, I tell you, the squirrels down here in Boston must have had really great parents, because the ones who live in my backyard are not scared of anything. They will walk inside my house. They will make nests inside my wife's engine and eat her wires. And there's no scaredy squirrels in my backyard.
Well, I guess that's what makes Scaredy unique. They're not all the same, I guess. But, I guess part of the inspiration was I was watching a squirrel once just running around the place, around a tree. And you know how if you're looking at them on a tree, they're going to always hide on the other side of the tree trunk. Like that, you can turn around, follow, they'll always be on the opposite side. Like it's kind of like their coping mechanism to hide. So for me, that represents, Scaredy in a way, and that they're always busy doing something, burying nuts or trying to figure it out. So it's
Tell us, Melanie, please, what's the difference? Somebody might be out there thinking, what's the difference between a picture book and a graphic novel and a comic book?
I have never worked on a comic book, so it's difficult for me to pronounce myself on that. But I can tell you, for me, a picture book, well, there's not as many pages to start with, and sometimes it's more of a narration. And for me, it's different too, because Scaredy has always been kind of even as a picture book, divided in different graphics, and he's always had a specific storytelling style that kind of resembles a graphic novel. So it kind of made sense to transition to that. But if you look at other types of picture books that I've done, I would say it's really just in how you present the information. It's maybe you get access to more little details in a graphic novel. You get access, like I said, to a dialogue that's interesting too.
Yeah. It really is something important for us to remember, that graphic novels there. Again, when my son was in middle school and he was devouring graphic novels, just like Cookie Monster, but wouldn't sit down and read a book without pictures, and that was frustrating for me. And I if I was able to turn back the time clock, I would have encouraged it, and I encouraged his reading of the graphic novels and the anime. But I didn't value it. I was very clearly letting him know that I thought reading traditional books without pictures was more valuable than reading graphic novels. And I think that was a mistake. Thankfully, he survived my mistake and my parenting, blunders. He's a great young man doing some really wonderful things out in the world. But I think there would have been some time for us to really, probably bond over some of the graphic novels that he was reading.
Well, for me, as a kid, I remember I wanted a lot of visuals. I'm an artist, and I think for me, a lot of information comes through the visual. So even when I create a book, sometimes I can't say exactly what I need to say through words. I'll say it visually through pictures and vice versa. So I think that really the combination of illustration and text is really an art. It's something that I personally enjoy. I like artists that also do both, because you get access to a different type of storytelling, because the artist can really control both elements, the visual and the text. It's not like two people working separately, but there are some great books that have different authors and illustrators too. But I'm not. The fact that you can kind of control your world when I'm creating, and I think it brings like a different level for me of creativity. So,
that's interesting. Now, typically as I'm thinking about it, in a graphic novel, there are many more illustrations than there are in a typical picture book. Does that mean that the illustrations are simpler and not as detailed as a full-page illustration in a picture book?
I guess it depends on the style of that artist. For sure, if you compare it to something more elaborate of a picture book, you'll see it, because I would say there's twice the amount of work that goes into a graphic novel for me than a picture book, because of the quantity of the illustrations and number of pages. And when you're communicating in boxes, it's almost more similar to maybe watching a TV show, where you kind of have the images up close of the characters speaking, and then you kind of get an image of you backing up and seeing the entire setting. So I guess that's where it's a little different. But the amount of work is, I would say, for me, is more with a picture, with a graphic novel than a picture book. Yeah. Just by the quantity.
Interesting. I'm curious, and this is going to sound like a silly question, so I apologize in advance, but that's what I'm known for, my silly questions. As you're creating one of these images that will appear as a small box on a page, maybe it's, there's a page of 6 or 8 of these small boxes on a page. Are you creating the original image in that size, or are you doing a full kind of image and then it gets shrunk down when it gets formatted and published?
I'm always working on the 100% size. So I have to sketch every page before I do the final art. So everything's kind of figured out ahead of time. So when it's time to actually draw the images, I know that it's supposed to fit on a certain size. So I'm going to make it 2 size. It's going to be the exact size it needs to be and be printed. So it's like you kind of go through the book many times. You're going to start with your ideas, and then you're going to have rough sketches, and then the sketches are going to get more precise, and then you go to final art, where you're really doing the actual final drawing, and you add the color. You can't really take an image and blow it up too big, because the pixels are going to show. So it's kind of, it has to be thought through the process.
Fascinating.
Does that make sense?
Well, it does, and it's I find the creation. I think, and I know I've mentioned this before. I heard a podcast with John Grisham, who's one of my favorite authors, kind of poo-pooed children's books and just said, who writes these things? 30 pages. You can get that out in half an hour. And it's creating a children's book. Yes, creating a children's book is lots and lots of work and lots of detail and lots of thought goes into it. And you can tell when you pick up a book and you can compare some books and you can look at a book and go, yeah, this was kind of done really quickly. And then the other book is like, yeah, I can see why it took 2 or 3 years for this book to come to life.
Yeah, and you're working with editors, and like I say, we're going through the manuscript, the art, everything multiple times to get everything as clean and well. I like to edit a lot. I don't. I want my jokes to kind of come back. It's like, like a running joke. Mm-hmm. Like these are things that for me I add towards the end because I can't plan those in the beginning. Mm-hmm. So in the beginning, what I'm doing is a structure of a story, and then I'm going to add gags and I say to myself, okay, maybe I should have added this in the beginning so I can have that link later on. So I never know really what's going to happen in the book when I start. I just know the theme, roughly how I'd like it to end. But humor just gets added throughout, and sometimes it's just going to be a visual humor. Sometimes it's going to be, the dialogue here needs to reflect this thing. So, yeah.
Neat. That's such an interesting insight and look into your creative process, and I'm happy that you shared that. What's next for Melanie Watt? Are you going back to picture books, having working on another graphic novel?
Actually, after this Scaredy Gets a Surprise, there's going to be a picture book, and it's Scaredy Squirrel Visits the Doctor. So it's going to be like 40 pages, and it should be coming out in October, late October. So that'll be nice.
Yeah. So neat. Well, I know people are going to want to know where they can go to find out more about Scaredy Squirrel Gets a Surprise and also find out more about you.
Well, there's MelanieWatt.com.
We've had a wonderful time speaking to the author and illustrator of Scaredy Squirrel Gets a Surprise, the great graphic novel from our guest, Melanie Watt. Hey, Melanie, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Dr. Ambrose Pass Turner. She'll be here to celebrate Rex's journey, helping children cope with emotion. It's her debut picture book. She shares a lot of really fantastic insight. You don't want to miss it. That's the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. If you are the author of a fantastic children's book, we would love to have you as a guest on the podcast. Being a guest is fun. It's easy. It gives you the chance to tell the world about your fantastic book in a long-form conversation. You get to tell the folks what you were inspired by. It gets to tell them a little bit about you. Of course, tell them about the book and why they might want to add it to their family library. Now, as I said, being a guest is fun. It's easy. It also doesn't cost you a thing. No need to pay anybody to facilitate your visit. All you need to do is go to readingwithyourkids.com, click on the Authors Click Here button at the top of the show, and scroll on down to be a guest. Oh, while you're at that Authors Click Here tab, you also might want to check out how you can submit your book to our Certified Great Read panel. And you also want to find out about our great promotion packages. We can celebrate your book to the world through commercials here on the podcast, messages to our 90,000 plus social media followers, and also display your book on our nationwide network of digital pedestrian billboards. Learn all about that and more at readingwithyourkids.com. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our guest, Melanie Watt. Please be sure to check out Scaredy Squirrel Gets a Surprise. Also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Nicole Bell Castro, Ashley Contreras, Mirabella Q. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.